So last week we promised Post-Apocalyptic.
Yes.
We actually were planning this.
We were.
And because you have been watching the new Planet of the Apes, the new.
Mm-hmm. The new. Not the
new.
like Burton one.
Yes.
But Caesar, Andy Serkis, that series.
I was skeptical. So we're going to talk about the first two. The fourth one is just out. And so this is only spoilers for the first two, not for even the third or the fourth one.
Yeah.
And we probably will spoil the Burton one and the Charlton Heston ones.
I haven't actually seen the Burton one.
Haven't you?
No.
Oh. I was going to say it's the Charlton Heston ones, but Charlton Heston is in them. Is in the Burton one.
Charlton Heston is in the Burton one?
He plays an ape.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. He's I remember very little of that.
Does he say, "Get your stinking hands off me, you damn dirty human"?
He is an ape who is like dying.
Okay.
And he gives a gun to. Ooh. He's like kind of a, we used to have these, I think, or something like that. Here's a gun. And I remember this because one of the reviews is like, Charlton Heston shows up to give people firearms. As
of course.
Was very characteristic of him.
As everyone should do.
Yeah, he was the spokesman for the NRA at the time. So delivering firearms to someone was, and that's basically all I remember. Was it Marky Mark who was?
I think so.
The star
you are
of
correct.
That one?
Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, Marky Mark. No sign of the Funky Bunch. They just don't.
They were all there, but they were presumably in ape costumes.
Ape costumes.
No, but the new ones.
The new ones.
Here's the thing.
Yep.
The reason I suggested this as a topic, the reason I'm watching them right now, is because there's a fourth movie coming out in this series. That is an impressively long and successful franchise that I had never actually watched any of them, and I feel like they haven't left much of a cultural footprint anywhere.
Yeah, it's one of those odd things.
Interesting.
That they... So... I haven't seen the third one, which is why we're not quite talking about it. I keep meaning to.
I haven't seen that one either. They're all on Disney Plus right now, which is how I'm going through them.
I went to the first one skeptical because the Marky Mark Charlton Heston one didn't work.
Yeah.
I appreciate some things about it, but it didn't land for me. It was Tim Burton doing his best to kind of like not be Tim Burton, and it just didn't land. So I went into the first of these new ones quite skeptical. And I think my experience is the same for a lot of people. They go to these not expecting much. They get there and they're like, that was a legit good movie.
Yeah.
And then they kind of forget about them. And then they go to the next one and like, I'd forgotten that those are legit good movies.
These are really good.
Andy Serkis is just an amazing actor and can convey some fantastic emotions with a CGI ape.
Yeah.
I should watch the rest of these. And then...
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, having seen the first two now, my general opinion is just that it is a miracle that these even exist.
Yeah.
The second one in particular is it is an incredibly serious story that they take very seriously.
Right.
It is about the fall of one culture, the rise of another culture, this post-apocalyptic clash between different species, like all of these very kind of old school science fiction questions that we almost never see in media, and it plays it completely straight. But it's like most of the characters are CGI chimpanzees, and it's
wild.
So hard to take that seriously, even as a fan of that kind of science fiction.
Right. And like, you've got this legacy, right? I like the Charlton Heston ones.
How many of the old Charlton Heston ones did you see?
Only seen 2.
Okay.
I know they made like 7.
I think it's only 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I've seen the classic first one, and that was good enough to have me watch a second one, right?
Yeah.
But I saw them in like the late 80s, early 90s as a teenager, kind of investigating old science fiction, which I went through a phase where I watched that. I watched Forbidden Planet. I watched The Day the Earth Stood Still. I just wanted to experience all the science fiction that was before my era. And it was hard to take those seriously. The camp level was so high in those. And so it's like they were trying in those as well, but they knew they were kind of campy. They were trying. That's like the legacy of the Planet of the Apes films, is like, this is serious science fiction, and we don't have the special effects to live up to it yet. Now they do, right? Like, these apes look good. And yet you're still saying it's kind of hard for you to take. Like, I never had a problem with that.
No. What I'm saying is, I wonder if that's one of the reasons that these kind of keep slipping out of people's memory.
Maybe.
Because while you're watching it, even watching it yesterday is when I finished the second one, I was thinking to myself, this is fantastic. This is such a tightrope. The whole movie felt like I was watching them walk on a tightrope. Between, taking this story completely seriously and believing that chimpanzees were people and all of these other things. And I wonder, this phenomenon you're talking about where people are like, oh yeah, I remember really liking the first one, but I haven't thought about it in 3 years since I watched it. I wonder if part of that is, once you leave the theater, your brain just goes, oh yeah, the goofy talking monkey movie. Maybe. Even though it isn't a goofy talking monkey movie.
Mine didn't do that.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm a science fiction nut, right? Like, and so for me, I think it is that the lack of continuing characters and story makes the franchise a tough sell for me.
That's true. Caesar, Koba, who's the villain in the second one, they're kind of the only ones that continue through.
Right. And it's hard to bond to the ape as a continuing character. I don't go and be like, man, I really need to know what happens with Caesar. In the same way, I'm like, oh, I really want to find out what happens with X other character.
Yeah.
And that might be part of it. But also, like you said, these movies are a miracle in that, like, the first one is a real slow burn. A really thoughtful look at aging and senility, mixed with this like ethics of using animals in order to try to better ourselves and all of this sort of stuff. That's, like you said, great classic science fiction sort of things, but it doesn't have like a hook. It doesn't have action in the same way that
it has a phenomenal closing sequence.
Yes,
when the apes finally leave, but that is the third movie. Like, the 3 acts of this movie are all incredibly different from each other. We have the corruption in science and look at aging chunk, and then we have the Caesar has to navigate prison chunk. And then we have this big rousing action sequence that's like 20 minutes long at the end.
Yeah, I suppose because they run on the bridge and everything. And
it's interesting that the movies. I like your point about not having a character to really hang your hat on, because the story they're telling is really about the change in civilization.
Right, like. I watched the first one, and when they announced the second, I assumed Caesar would have been dead for hundreds of years. And it was not about him anymore, because that ending seems to imply that.
Yeah.
And so I came and I'm like, oh, this is about Caesar again. Is the third one about him too?
It apparently is. I read the description of it. I honestly was a little disappointed because I was kind of hoping that it would jump further into the future. There's a jump of 10 years between 1 and 2. And I was really impressed with how the first movie just kind of swung for the fences and seeded all the right science fictional elements into it. Even though apparently, having read the Wikipedia article, there were no plans for a sequel at that time. The director and the writer just knew that if they were successful, they would get one, so they laid the groundwork for it.
Right.
Because the second one wouldn't have worked at all. The first one, actually, I think probably wouldn't even have worked without all of the human-killing virus stuff that they put into it.
Yep. But they did know, like, one of the nice things about a remake like this, which is not a strict remake, this is a prequel, but a different lore, right? Like it's how we got to the Planet of the Apes, which all the previous 2 incarnations are like apes exist. Human discovers Planet of Apes.
Well, the original old ones, the 60s ones, they did 1 and 2, which I assume are the ones you've seen. And then 3, 4, and 5, they do actually jump into the past, and Caesar is a character in them.
Oh, okay, so they are remakes. I didn't know that.
They're at least the first one is kind of sort of a remake reboot of the third one.
Yeah.
And they share the name, Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay. So they're kind of in continuity with the Charlton Heston originals, which is actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
Except with it being a remake and things like that.
With better technology, things like that.
So are they gonna it would be actually super cool if they made the 5th movie and it was a remake of the Planet of the Apes.
Of the Planet of the Apes ones?
Yeah. Just the original Charlton Heston astronaut lands on Planet of the Apes. Doesn't know it's Earth. It is Earth. Surprise. I mean, that's not a spoiler anymore. It's one of the most famous scenes in all of cinematic history. And you now have an entire series taking place on Earth.
Yeah.
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if they're angling toward that. The 4th one, which is just coming out now, does apparently jump like 100 or 200 years into the future.
So it's no longer
it shows,
Andy Serkis.
That Caesar's gone. They have a much more advanced civilization.
Yeah.
Though not yet at modern human levels. I wonder how long they can string this along and show the growth and modernization of the ape civilization before they just remake the original and call it good.
That would actually be pretty awesome.
It would be. I would love to watch the long, slow burn 10 movie franchise of Apes Industrial Revolution. That would be amazing.
I can jump in a little bit because I actually have seen Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
Well, don't give us spoilers because he's going to watch it next.
Yeah, no spoilers.
Okay.
Other than you are correct. They are slowly clearly trying to angle towards.
So 4 is 100 years
They
later,
actually never specify. The only thing they say is it is many generations after X.
Okay, so it's probably more than 100 then.
Yeah, that is all they give. But Caesar's...
That's awesome.
Yeah, Caesar's arc is 1,
just
2,
the
3.
first 3.
Yeah,
okay.
They're like, this will be him, and then it seems like they're like, oh, okay, now we can finally start this process.
Someone gets a gold star for making this franchise work as well as they have.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to go watch the 3rd one now that I remember that I liked the first 2 so well, so that we can watch the 4th one.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the cool twist ending of the Tim Burton one?
Yes.
So Tim Burton one is Planet of the Apes again. But astronaut in space lands on, it's the Planet of the Apes, but it doesn't turn out to be Earth. But he flies home and he lands in front of the Lincoln Memorial and it's an ape.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
So I don't know how they didn't,
just things have changed. Have you read the book, the original book all this was based on? Because in the novel, or it's actually like a novella, it isn't Earth. It's just another planet where apes became the dominant species, and I can't remember if there's humans or not. The innovation of making it a Earth post-apocalypse came from the fact that they were making it during the Cold War, and that's all anyone could think about.
Right.
Which I think made it better, frankly. The book is kind of weird and directionless without that stinger at the end.
Again, it's one of the most famous and powerful scenes in cinematic history, and it makes that movie just work.
Yeah.
Even with all the goofiness, even with Charlton Heston chewing the scenery, that moment is chilling. And so, what do you think of post-apocalyptic movies in general? Is this a thing you like, or is it?
It's a thing I like very much. I'm a big fan of that genre. All the Mad Maxes. I've seen every Mad Max movie multiple times.
Yeah, even Road Warrior, huh?
Well, Road Warrior's the best one. No, Fury Road's the best one. Road Warrior is the previous best one.
It is good.
Which, the goofy one is 3.
Yes.
Thunderdome, which is still, I love it, but it's definitely the goofy one of the 3.
I can't watch Thunderdome anymore. I just can't.
Yeah.
After having seen Fury Road and be like, oh, it could have been this all along. That's, yeah.
I love it as a piece of kind of frozen in time. Let's just let our imaginations run as crazy as we want to let them go.
As much as we can do with our current tech. And unfortunately, it has to be just super campy because that's what our current tech lends itself to.
Yeah.
Well. But, I mean, I'm fond of it. I just can't watch it anymore. I like that genre. It's one of those things where it's like, there are premises that you have to just accept for science fiction stories to work.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes they are ridiculous. You have to accept, for Mad Max, a whole bunch of pills to swallow.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like I remember the day when someone sat me down and said, well, here's the problem. Well, actually, and tried to kind of ruin Mad Max for me. And it didn't work because I'm like, but you don't understand what the premise of the story is. The premise of the story is not how long does gasoline actually last without, an industrial complex. The premise is if society breaks down completely, what do we do with the people who are trying to build it back up? And how do you react when you're a person that's on the line, like Max is, between those two, those two factions, chaos and an attempt to build something new? That's what it's about. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if gas would not actually last. Who cares, right? That's not a plot hole. That's a basic premise of the film. And I guess I'm outing myself here. I think maybe I've mentioned this before. I probably have. I really, really like Waterworld.
Oh, I love Waterworld.
Waterworld was the best Mad Max for me until
Fury Road.
Fury Road. I liked Waterworld better than Road Warrior because I liked the epic scope. And I like watching this and being like, this is what Mad Max wanted to be. And it wanted to be serious. And it can be serious because the special effects have gotten to the point where it can be.
Yeah. Have you seen the director's cut of Waterworld that adds about 15 minutes to it?
I have, yes.
It's so good.
Yeah. The movie was good anyway.
The movie was good.
It was rushed.
But they add almost all the time that they add in those 15 minutes is on the atoll, where people are talking about what they're doing and how do we resist these outsiders and what do we do with this weird gill man who showed up.
About, right?
Yeah. All of the kind of personal, political stuff. That scene alone makes the entire movie work 5-10 times better. It's amazing.
It's a good movie. It does not deserve anywhere near the reputation that it has. It is not a punchline. The overspending probably can be, right? They spent more than their budget, but
they spent a lot of money. Most movies overspend their budget.
Yeah.
And it got just absolutely excoriated for being the first $200 million movie.
Right.
That's small change today.
Even adjusted for inflation. It's, yeah. So I don't know. I like it. What's our fascination with post-apocalypse, though?
Ooh,
why do we love it?
That's a big question. Before we tackle that question, I want to ask if you've seen any of the Fallout TV show.
I have not.
Have you played any of the Fallout games?
I've played every one multiple times.
Okay.
So the TV show, I'm going to say this. I watch TV shows with my wife.
Yeah.
I am worried about the translation of the video game violence of Fallout, which is a selling point, to a live action show.
It's real gory.
Yep.
Way. But I'm curious because... And now I want to warn our listeners, we now might be getting into spoilers for Fallout, so please...
The video games.
The video games and the TV show.
Well, don't spoil the TV show. It's brand new out.
Okay, I will not spoil it, but I will say, I had only ever played the first 2 video games.
Okay. You're missing out by not playing New Vegas.
That's what I hear.
Yep.
I tried Fallout 3, which was the first one that went 3D and first-person shooter or third-person shooter, whatever it was. And
it was
something
FPS.
about that gameplay really didn't work for me, and I got angry at it. I didn't give it enough time. I absolutely do need to go back and try the series.
Yeah.
But my point in bringing this up is that in those first 2 movies, the first 2 games, they were very much Cold War inspired. And so the ultimate reason behind everything was just humans are dumb and nuclear war happened.
Yeah.
Whereas apparently the more modern games, they gave a very different backstory, which I did not discover until watching the movie, and it kind of ruined it for me at the end when I realized, oh, this is what...
Oliver wants to say something.
Oh, what do you want to say?
Hello.
Oh, hello, Oliver. The new kind of premise to that apparently the games brought and then the TV show continued is very hard for me to swallow. And I don't know how to talk about it anymore without giving spoilers.
We can talk about it at the end because I didn't even know what you're talking about, and I played all the games.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe. So here's my take on the Fallout games.
Okay.
As a gamer who loves these, I really like 1 and 2, but I don't like tactics games. I like FPSs. Because I don't love tactics games. I've never been able to play. I don't like Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah.
I didn't like Brotherhood.
Brotherhood of Steel.
Right?
That was actually my favorite one in the series.
It's most people's favorite one.
Yeah.
A lot of people's. I played through it. It's not my favorite, right? Because the tactics is not what interests me. It's the world building, lore, story, and the feeling of isolation in a post-apocalyptic world. Very relevant to what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So 3 has storytelling problems and was not able to be my favorite, but it was close. And then New Vegas just had everything I loved from the first 2 games, but also let me feel like I was a person in the wasteland, walking around, being there, interacting, role-playing on a level I hadn't been able to do before. And it easily became my favorite in the series.
So New Vegas is the one I need to try then.
New Vegas, if you like the storytelling of 1 and 2, but again, it's still an FPS. And so you still have to be okay with the idea of being an FPS.
I think my complaint about it initially was mostly just a "you're not my real dad" kind of reaction. Because I love that kind of isometric tactical turn-based thing, and was just petulant about it.
And I never got into them. Like even things like Baldur's Gate and stuff. Not my thing as much as it did everybody else's. I don't ever want to pause. If you're pausing the game like that, then like it doesn't feel, I'm not immersed. Like there's some games it'll work for, but for those, I wanted to be immersed. And being able to pick up a gun and turn off VATS and never have it exist. Turn off their dumb like bullet time where a bullet goes and you watch it kill the guy. Like turn off everything that would take me out of the perspective of myself, even though they work in VATS really well. Like, like I just get to pick up a gun and go walk through the wasteland and maybe get attacked by rad scorpions and find out what's out there. It just really works for me. And Michael Dorn is back in New Vegas. So. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will have to give it a try. Also, we really need to get you to play Helldivers.
Yeah. My son's been playing it a ton.
Yeah.
No video games for me for a couple more weeks.
I know. You're still busy, and we want you to finish Stormlight 5 and everything. But at some point, Donald is the one that got me to finally download Helldivers 2, and I did, and I'm obsessed with it. It's as good or better than everyone says.
That's great.
I'm astonished by
if
how
it has
much
a good gameplay loop, I already know the aesthetic is awesome. That sounds like fun.
It's ridiculous how well designed it is as a game.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to your question about. I would love at some point in the future when we can spoil Fallout to talk about that Fallout ending because I think it merits discussion. But your question of why are we so fascinated by post-apocalypse stuff? My answer used to be Cold War. Because that's when you and I grew up. We were surrounded by the threat of nuclear war until I was in junior high, right? That's just our childhood. But Fallout is even more popular now than it was back then. Clearly, growing up in the Cold War is not the thing that makes post-apocalypse stuff interesting.
And I would have said the same thing as you, but now as I look for counterexamples, The Time Machine, the first post-apocalyptic chronologically story that I've ever read, chronologically, the first written, the oldest.
Yeah, the one that was written first.
I'm sure there's one before because there's always something before. But The Time Machine happened H.G. Wells' time. I mean, this is pre-World War I.
Yeah.
And the fascination, the Time Machine has only two things going for it. One is time travel, and two is in the future we've become these weird creatures. Look how scary it is. Humankind's future is really deeply disturbing. That's its hook. That's its and I think that might be it. Like, it's the same reason we love zombies to an extent. It's a reflection of ourselves in a scary way. And post-apocalyptic is like, it's Children of the Flies, right?
Yeah.
Or Lord of the Flies. Lord of the Flies, Children of the Corn. Lord of the Flies.
That's a crossover I want to see.
Yeah, the Children of the Corn win. I mean, how not really a question there.
Yeah.
But like, we love watching that. Is that all of it?
See, Time Machine is a good one to bring up because one of the things we can always say about science fiction and horror and I maybe even fantasy is that it tends to be a reflection of our time.
Yes.
Right? What were people afraid of in the 50s and 60s? Nuclear war. And so that's what the science fiction was about. What were people afraid of in H.G. Wells' time? Well, that was at the height of the kind of scientific explosion, or at the beginning of it, I should say. That's when we were just starting to get scientific papers about evolution.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, okay, species can change over time. I'm going to write about how that can go disastrously wrong.
That's a good point.
So all of these things are reflecting. That's why all the modern Fallout stuff is much more overtly about capitalism and economy than the original games were. It was still always there, but we tend to write about what we're currently concerned about. And yet, as you say, in every one of those different societal periods, we keep going back to post-apocalypse. I wonder if part of it might be a clean slate allows us to build whatever society we need built in order to get our point across.
Yeah, it's that dystopian thing. It's like, hey, let's highlight one aspect of humankind negatively so that we can reflect upon it and also have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It might also just be kind of the Wild West aspect, that here you are without all of the cushions and guardrails of a real civilization, and yet you still have to survive. And we just like watching people be clever and figure out how to survive.
Yeah, that's a good point. Somewhere out there, someday, I have a Fallout / Buck Rogers inspired, because Buck Rogers is also kind of post-apocalyptic, just sci-fi.
Kind of, sort of.
Video game story for a video game I would someday love to make. So, but it's like $100 million, like.
Oh, easy.
Yeah. So if someone ever wants to fund my really awesome story for a post-apocalyptic sci-fi video game FPS, come talk to me.
Okay.
I got a good one.
Yeah, fund it. We know that all of you want to design it. Don't email us about this.
Yes. If you have
unless you have $100 million.
Unless you're working at a major game studio who is like, you know what we need? Some way to spend $100 million on some really fantastic new IP. I actually been working on this one for years, 7 years.
That's cool.
And it will not ever work as a book. So
okay, needs to be a game, huh?
Needs to be a game.
That is intriguing. I look forward to hearing about this secretly, not on microphones.
Yeah.
And none of the rest of you can.
It'll never happen.
Sorry.
Video games are too expensive a medium to experiment on the admittedly very cool ideas of a fantasy novelist. But
okay.
Yeah, with the current video game industry, there's no way, especially with all those studios that just got closed. So
yes. Yeah.
Start a new studio, get $1 million.
Start a new studio with $100 million.
$100 million. Yeah.
Huh. Are we forgetting any other major post-apocalyptic properties?
Oh, I'm sure we were. We are. I'm glad you remembered Fallout, because otherwise the comment section would be like, "Excuse me, it's only the biggest television show going on right now."
Yeah, the most watched thing Amazon has ever put out. Which, and honestly, I loved it. Like, I had some problems with the ending, but the entire thing was great. I'm excited to see more of it. I loved every bit about it except Max, who was dumb.
I don't know who Max is.
Yeah,
but
that's okay. I'm wrong, and everyone's going to complain about it, but I stand by my wrong opinion. Now, we've talked about cyberpunk a lot in the past, and cyberpunk as a genre is one of my favorites. But it's never really huge. The video game is a big success. But one of Amazon's other properties recently, this was a year or two ago, was The Peripheral by William Gibson. Have you ever read The Peripheral?
I have not. My Gibson is woefully lacking. I've read Neuromancer and I think Johnny Mnemonic when the movie came out. So like the amount, I might have read a short story or two, but the amount of Gibson I've read is tragic.
It's tragically low.
Tragic for how great a writer he is.
At the very least, finish the Sprawl trilogy because they get better. Count Zero is better than Neuromancer. Mona Lisa Overdrive is better than Count Zero.
I've heard that.
Anyway, The Peripheral is one of his recent ones, and that is very much a post-apocalyptic story as well, in one of the two time periods that it deals with. And I loved the TV series of it so much because it's one of the first times I've seen a modern-looking cyberpunk story.
Okay.
Cyberpunk visually is so mired in the 1980s.
Yep.
And The Peripheral broke out of that.
Right? I mean, I like the aesthetic.
Yeah.
Vaporwave is pretty cool, but it is kind of odd that this subgenre that was invented during a time got trapped in that time. Like our post-apocalyptic moves, right? Even though we see remnants of our time right now in the post-apocalypse. So yeah.
Even with Fallout, which is going so heavily for a 50s-ish kind of vibe, you can still tell that it's an advanced civilization and there's other things.
I mean, the premise of Fallout is that the nuclear war happened during a time, during the nostalgia cycle, where the 50s nostalgia had come back. And so designs of robots and things were inspired by 50s tech. It's not actually the 50s getting nuked.
Yeah, which
as I understand.
One of the things that always kind of bugs me about Star Trek, for example, or other future things is that when they do pop culture references, it's almost always to whatever's currently popular when it was written. Rather than, and Fallout is one of the ones I love because they project, well, what's going to be popular 100 years in the future, and how can we change this around? And so anyway, that's a fun thing about it, but.
Well, we're going to end now so I can talk to you about the ending of Fallout.
Okay.
We're not going to do it on the air.
Eventually we will.
Eventually we will. How's that, Ben?